I want you to think of the biggest screw up, F up person that you know in your life. And especially maybe it's one from the past that you thought was a screw up and an F up. And then I want you to think about what it might be like if you ended up being on that list of being the biggest screw up and F up in somebody's life, you know? So this is my third episode of me talking about what's happened over the last couple decades. If you don't know who I am, you'll find out, I guess, if you want to. I used to have a pretty big life, and then my husband had a traumatic brain injury, and then our life blew up, and I kind of disappeared for a while. And through a whole bunch of miracles, my husband is recovered after 22 years. And the last couple years we've been spending getting to know each other again. And I'm here now talking about what that has been like and what it's like to have your life be so intensely stressful and complicated that from the outside, somebody who had this incredible life and then all of a sudden they disappear and it looks really crazy. The stories that might circulate because of that. This video is for anybody who has had to do very out of the box things and live a very unconventional life just to survive your life, and what kind of person that turns you into. And the best way that I can describe it is that you become what's called a first adopter or a second adopter. Okay, when you're a first adopter, that means you are somebody who is doing something for the first time. And maybe you're not the first adopter in the whole known universe, but you're the first adopter that you know of. I think that's the most important part. Doing something that you don't know how to do, that you don't know that's ever been done, that you don't know is going to work. Now, I've heard before that the second adopter is even more brave than the first adopter, because they'll see someone doing something and they'll see everybody else rolling their eyes and going, you're crazy, but they'll still go join them. And so they have to not just overcome, I wonder what will happen if I do this, but they have to overcome, oh my gosh, they don't have to wonder if people are going to think it's crazy because they see everybody around them thinking it's crazy. So then from there, more people adopt, and then at some point it becomes, a well-known thing. And sometimes it becomes a well-known thing that is good, and sometimes it still becomes a well-known thing that makes you into a freaking weirdo. My life over the last couple decades has been that. And I know just from comments people make and questions people ask that lots of times people think that I make crazy choices that end me up in crazy places, and they say it like they think I had other choices. Now that's what I want to talk about, because I know this whole channel, I want it to be about starting over at this age, and it could be starting over at any age, but starting over when you are not young, where people are supposed to be starting things, it has a whole other set of complications. And one of them is just, you have to get over the stigma of people seeing that you're not living things conventionally, because in the Western world, probably in all parts of the world, and especially in the cultures that I grew up in, there's a very prescribed checklist of what's the best way to live your life. And I don't know that I've ever followed that, but my life was on a pretty cool trajectory of being, the American dream. I was married. I'm still married, 36 years, had children, 5 children, pretty young, before I was even 30, started a business, lived the American dream, lived in a home, several homes, just active in the community, active in my family of origin, my husband's family of origin, active, social life, pretty normal, pretty basic. Some of it was pretty spectacular and out there, but then everything fell apart. All the scaffolding that was holding all of that up kind of just burned away, got whipped away through a series of things that happened, starting with my husband's traumatic brain injury. And then suddenly even I'm feeling really uncomfortable with how unconventional my life is. And also not having the time or the energy or even the wherewithal or the answer to be able to answer people's questions when they say, what is going on in your life? You know, when your life falls apart like that, and especially because I had a really public career, but even before social media, I had a pretty public career. I was in magazines, I was on television shows, I was on packaging. My name was on packaging. My name was even a brand. But then when social media happens, like remember MySpace? I remember even I remember where I lived in my first Facebook post. I think it was in 2009 or something. Then social media comes, and all of a sudden everything is everywhere. And that is, like I said in my last video, like it's so fun and it's so amazing when your life is going so great. But when your life kind of falls apart, it's not so great after that. And I know because of the work that I do, I still work with women. I have, 60 courses that I've written. I've written 20 books. And I have retreats, and I have art and healing retreats, and then I have 200 certified instructors that actually teach my curriculum. So I have certification retreats, and I'm going to say 80% of the women and now men who come through my courses and specifically through certification are, whether by choice or by life circumstance, are these first adopters. Because they've had to figure out ways to live their life that either their belief system changed and they couldn't live in alignment with how they were living their life. And that's a whole different kind of blow up in your life. Or something happened that took the scaffolding away. When my husband had his accident in 2004, he loves how wild and creative and how willing I am to do things differently than everybody else. He at the time was very systematic, very logical, very, very organized, very by the book, golden boy, Boy Scout, Eagle Scout. He was, on the city council. He was the mayor for a while. He was, he was doing all these things really, really young. And then he marries this wild and free artist. Now, over time, he has had to adapt to being somebody who has kind of a more unconventional life, because that was really the only way that we could get out of a lot of the situations that we've gotten in. But also, over time, he's almost 60 years old now. He's learned that on the inside, when he peels away the conditioning of how he was raised and what he was taught as a kid, it doesn't really align with what he believes. And so he's been more willing to live an unconventional life and be a first adopter. Like I said, I think I came out of the womb that way. I think I came out of the womb as somebody that's like, well, what if we did this? What if we tried it like this? What if we did it a little bit different? What if we didn't do that? I was always asking myself that. And it's so fun while it's fun. And then it's so painful and complicated when it's not. And I want to just talk to those of you who have been, where life has put you in a situation where you have had to, in front of all of the planet, in front of everybody that lots of times, your whole community, and now the whole internet, if you have any kind of a following, you've had to readjust your whole life from the acceptable, prescribed checklist way of living to something that you've never even seen done before. Or maybe you've seen it done, but you've seen the disaster of it. It doesn't turn out like a disaster as much as the disaster is having to try to explain to everybody what's going on in your life, and hearing things like, I would never do that. I don't even care what happened in my life. I would never do that. And I just always think, wow, I hope you never have to find out what you would do, because there have been so many times where, like I said, all these people that I work with, you know, I sit at my retreats for an entire week, an unplugged week where there's no technology, and I hear the depths of human stories. And so I know where people are coming from, and I know what they've been through. And so I can speak to this from a lot of authority, that when your life kind of falls apart and you have to start over, lots of times the hardest part isn't the starting over, it's the dealing with everybody around you and how they're handling it, and what you find out they're saying about you, and the questions that they're asking, and the questions they're not asking, and the things they say, and especially the things they don't say. That's one of the very, very hardest parts. And so if you're here because you are attracted to all the keywords that I put, because I've been very specific about the audience that I'm looking for, it's people who are starting over, and especially from a disaster after, you know, age 40 or 50 years old. Like I said, it's easy when you're young because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to practice. You're supposed to fall down and get back up and try again and try something else and try something different. But when it's not so cute when you're a grandparent doing that, you know. Because I have 8 siblings, and I was really different than all my siblings. You know, I come from a family of intellectuals, and you know, I have a brother who's a physicist and brothers who are engineers, and they're just such very, very good people, rule followers, and I just didn't come like that. I came saying, what are some other ways we could do it though? What would feel truer to me? What could make this more fun? What could make this more beautiful? What could make this an even better experience? You know, if you've ever been to one of my events, you see, like, I deck everything out to as far as I can, and that's how my brain is. Like, add more twinkle lights. So let's see what happens if you add some, you know, metallic gold ink to this. Like, let's see. And it's like that in every part of my life. But it's complicated, you know. And now that I'm this age, you know, 55 this year, and I look at what I was doing when I was 25, and I think about when I was, you know, I lived in a town of 200 people, and I had this idea for a book, and I drew a little picture of it, and I put it in the classifieds of a magazine. I hadn't even written the book. It was just an idea, and I literally did a little hand-drawn picture of what the cover could look like, and I put an ad in the magazine, and then I started getting checks in the mail, and then I wrote the book. And then I immediately, because I grew up in a small town and in a community where everybody knew each other, I was just like, I'm gonna just start going to Barnes and Noble, and I'm gonna look up in magazines, you know, who the person is who in charge of the magazine is. And I started calling editors of magazines and just telling them who I was and asking them how I get in the magazine. And so many times they would be like in New York or somewhere else, and they would just start laughing, and they would be like, well, just you having the nerve to call me and ask me this, I'm going to help you out. Like, and it wasn't nerve at that time. It was naive excitement and naive passion. And I think that's the thing that I'm trying the most to get back after life jades you, you know, and you go through these experiences that just beat you to a pulp. And I think as I've disappeared over the last 5 years, and like I said, my husband recovered 2 years ago, and that's been a different kind of like sequestering of like, okay, what are we gonna do now? You know, because I got into a rhythm when he wasn't all here, and I was with him in the ways I could be, and then the rest of my life was a completely different show. And now I have this time to be with him, but I'm working so hard at getting that grit and that courage back to be somebody who's like, you know what, I have this really good idea for a book, so I'm just going to call the editor of a magazine. You know, I don't know, do we even have magazines anymore? Like, everything's so different. But because I have fallen on my face so many times, and I have been hurt so many times, my courage is not the same as it was when I was 20 and 25 and 30, and you know, I think I was 33 years old when my husband had his accident, and ever since then I've started seeing like what can happen in the human condition, and it's made me both have massive amounts of mercy for the human condition and made me, in lots of ways, completely freaked out and scared by the human condition. What I really want is to go back to being that first adopter girl who is just like, I wonder what would happen if I did this. And that's kind of, what I'm doing now. The whole social media scene is just covered with the girls that look like me when I was 25, but I'm 55 now, and I'm wondering, like, I have things to say, and I'm constantly looking for people my age to say those things for me to hear. I have things I want to hear. I have things I want to learn, and I'm constantly looking for people my age who have been through things I've been through. Although I have massive amounts of respect for these young girls, because I know what that was like too. You know what an apologist is? It's somebody who goes in as an advocate for a group that's getting attacked. And I am an apologist for the human condition. Like right now I'm being an apologist for, women of my age, but I've been an apologist. I will be an apologist for the entire human condition. I'm not going to bash youth. I'm not going to bash the perfect way these kids look that are, influencers and things like that, because I was that, I was 25 once, I was 20 once, I was 30 once, and now I'm 55. But I'm pioneering again, like this thing I'm doing here, I look at like the close-ups of my videos. Wow. I'm usually wearing these, so I could definitely see better how I look if I'm wearing these, but when I take them off, I have perfect skin. And I was looking at a video, and it was like I could see, like, I was like, what happened to my chin and my jawline? Like, I hadn't even noticed. And that, part of that just makes you want to quit. You're like, this job of being seen belongs to the ones who haven't lost their youthful vigor yet. There's a part of me that says that. But man, I'm looking for people my age, and so I think there's probably more people looking for people our age, and so I'm going to be one of the adopters that gets on here and says the things. And this story, like I said, that we're just about to tell about my husband's brain injury, is one that I would have given anything to hear, all the way along, the whole last 22 years. So the point of this whole video is, please, I don't know if we need to start a revolution. Maybe one already started that you could tell me about, but we need more people our age talking about what this is like, especially if it didn't follow the script, the checklist, the formula, the recipe, the plan, the perfect American dream, the perfect plan. If you put everything you had into that plan and then you fell on your face and lost it all, and you're starting over at an age where at one time, this year I start getting senior discounts, When I was 25 and 30 and even 40, I was thinking, I worked really, really hard. And I thought, wow, by the time I'm that old 55-year-old, I'm going to be retired. I'm going to be with my grandkids all the time. I'm going to be traveling. My life's going to be all set up. It's not like that. It's not like that at all. We are so grateful that our prayers have been answered, and my husband is experiencing this incredible recovery, and we're having a whole new renewal of our relationship and our family and everything like that. But we're also completely starting over, at this age, and we're doing it, and we're gonna do it. But there aren't manuals for that. And I know, because of all that's happened, since the world kind of burned down, there's a whole lot of people our age that are in this situation. People that you could say, if you're not in this situation, because I used to be like that. I used to say things like, well, if they'd have made better choices, or if they just would have followed the plan and stayed with the corporation and gotten a retirement, or if they wouldn't have taken so many risks, or if they wouldn't have blah, 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 everybody that's life whose life is working out really well right now has something to say about those whose lives isn't so steady and working out. And I get that, because like I said, I used to be like that. That's the first place our brain wants to go is, well, if they just would have done what I did, they'd be where I am. Honey, baby, dude, whoever you are, we were completely debt free, almost had our house paid off, worked our butts off when my husband had his traumatic brain injury. And we sacrificed for that. We didn't have new cars. We didn't have new things. Like, we did all the things we were supposed to do. We did investments. We did all the things. And when you have something like that comes and just completely crushes your life, and every day you have to spend your resources to get to the next day, the resources start running out really, really fast. And that's just one of 10 trillion stories, you know, that obviously we've made mistakes just like everybody else. And obviously people have periods of addiction, you know, that they go through, and periods when maybe they weren't making the best life choices. But I promise you, every moment that they made a decision, they were doing the best they could in that moment. And sometimes we have to make decisions, or we do terrible things that cost everything later on. But to say that if you would have followed a perfectly prescribed formula, I remember when things were so bad and I had people asking me if I was praying, and holy moly, this video has been hard to make today. I just had to start up again. Okay, I think what I was saying was, I remember a time when everybody was trying to figure out why so many things were going wrong in our life. And the conclusion from a lot of people was that we must be doing something wrong. And so I know what was happening. And so that's the whole theme of this video, is that when you either decide to, or life kind of puts you in a corner and you have to live a life that's really unconventional, you almost always have to be a first adopter or a second adopter. And what that means is that you have to be the advocate for your decisions and for your life. And it has to come to a point where you know with everything in you why you're doing what you're doing, that you're doing the best thing you can think of, and that sometimes it's the exact right thing for your life, and if it's not, you find out later that you learned from it, but maybe it's time to pivot. So my plea to you today is that you give yourself some grace, and you give yourself some congratulation and some mercy and some respect that you have done everything you could, everything you know to do. And if you are somebody who's, like I said, either you decided not to follow the standard prescription in life and everything went perfectly as planned, like it does in the Disney movies. If you started out that way and then you did everything you thought was right and things still fell apart, or if you said, I don't like this checklist and I'm going to try something totally different, and your life has been difficult either way, I just want to say, keep going. Just keep going, you know? Enjoy it every day. Give yourself the respect that maybe other people aren't giving you. Look yourself in the mirror and say, I always did the thing that I thought was the next best thing. And I was courageous and I was brave. Lots and lots of people are never going to know what it feels like to have to choose between 10 really crappy choices. All of them not having beautiful outcomes, you know, all of them just maybe getting you to the next step and having lots and lots of really difficult consequences. Lots of people will never know what it's like when everything you had and everything you counted on was gone, and so you have to be a first adopter and do things maybe that have never been done, or that at least you don't know anybody that have ever been done with. That's who I'm talking to. And I see you. I feel you. I'm making these videos for you these videos aren't for the person whose life turned out perfectly. I'm so happy for you, by the way, if that happened for you. If you started out with a plan and everything went perfectly according to plan, just please don't judge the people that didn't happen for. It's not because they made bad choices. It's because really crappy things happen sometimes in life, and they have to pivot and adjust. And sometimes we do make crappy choices. But even the people whose lives have turned out fairly easy and beautiful, and you know, even those people have made mistakes. We all have, and we're all just doing the best that we can. I am a human experience apologist. That's a new title that I'm giving to myself. So I have mercy and grace for all of it and all of you. And I'm going to have to stitch this whole thing together because of so many malfunctions with technology and everything else. But hopefully I can stitch it together in a way that it means something. And I'm going to stick with my goal of posting every day. And so I will see you tomorrow. Mwah.